Hello everyone and welcome back to Whisky Wednesday. We're finally back on Scottish whisky and I'm bringing this to you all. Highland Park Cask Strength, batch number 2. This is bottled at 63.9%. Fun story with this one, I managed to pick it up for £50. Retail on this is anywhere between about 60 to 65. It didn't come with a box, so they knocked it down to 50 quid. As a result, I don't have all the usual information that would accompany this bottle. Natural cask strength, one would assume non-chill filtered. That's probably a tick. Colour, don't know. It also doesn't actually state natural cask strength on the front. It just says cask strength. So leave that up to debate, however you would. Highland Park. So this is a little bit of a chat before we actually taste the whisky. A distillery which has been the victim of its own marketing. As someone who works in the retail section of whisky, I've seen less purchasing of Highland Park than in the past couple of years, in quite a big way. I'm actually going on holiday. I'm going through an airport for the first time in 3 years at the end of August, and I'm intrigued to see what Highland Park is doing in airports. Just going to ask the staff and see what's kind of going on with it. But since the rebranding with the whole sort of Viking thing, which I actually don't mind, but I think a lot of people have just kind of fallen by the wayside. I retried Highland Park 18 in a shop the other day. I was shopping for a friend's birthday present and in a shop in Manchester, a whisky shop in Manchester. And I was just looking at Highland Park 18, I was thinking, I know he likes the 12, so I might get him that. And the staff let me try it. I was like, oh cool, it's been a while, just in general. And yeah, I wasn't blown away. It tasted like a £50 bottle of whisky. Luckily, this actually is, for this one time, a £50 bottle of whisky. I have had a brief, yet very in-depth chat with Rob, who is the guy who runs Whisky in the Six in Canada, and we were chatting about this particular whisky, and he has chatted about it with Jeremy, who runs Sipper Socials Club on their Whisky Rant podcast quite a bit. And to summarise this product, it's perfectly good, like it's fine whisky. They thought it drank a little bit too hot. I've only tried batch 1 once, and it was in a small sample bottle. This obviously I've got a full bottle of, although I'm ashamed to say that I forgot that I owned it. If you look back to prior videos when I'm filming in my old office, you'll see it just like here behind me. But I literally forgot that I owned this bottle of whiskey, which isn't a great start. But they were saying, isn't it a shame that it doesn't have an age? And I'm not normally one to get on top of a distillery about age. We all understand how a single malt is produced, and if the minimum age you require isn't there and the stock isn't good, to have a non-age statement is slightly better because you can still make the product taste the way it does without the idea of having a 6 or a 10 or a 12 on it. But if you're going to bottle something at 63.9% and call it cask strength, why wouldn't you put an age on it? Aberlour doesn't with both versions of the Boona. Glenlivet no longer do with the Nadora. But I do miss that Nadora 16-year-old because that thing was just incredible. Glendronach, theirs isn't age stated anymore. I don't think it's ever been age stated, but they don't put an age statement on theirs. Macallan don't. What's around me? Glen Scotia do. Obviously independent bottlers do. But why wouldn't you just put the age on the front of it? Because at that strength, we can safely assume that the highest age in this thing is 12, maybe 13, possibly even lower. I think 12, even in my own estimates, is quite a high number. But if it was a 7-year-old, just put 7 on the front of it. Because in theory, the person who's buying this product isn't going to be the person who's buying Highland Park 12 in a supermarket, or isn't even the person who's necessarily buying Highland Park 18 or 25, because those whiskies work at their set strengths. Someone who's buying a 64% whiskey is going to be someone who is there to experience a distillery in its rawest characteristics. And in my opinion, if you are going to show that off, show off the age of the barrels. It's one of the only situations where I think an age statement is kind of required, because it will dispel so many myths about whiskey. Anyway, I digress. Let's smell and taste it. So the camera died when I was trying to set this up. I hadn't charged it. So this has been sat in the glass for like half an hour. And compared to some of the recent videos we've done, where the whiskey has made a beautiful impression upon the glass, this one doesn't really. Maybe I'm just really bad at this. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's slightly better in that light. But given the ABV of it all, I thought that'd be particularly oily. Ooh, okay. So the smell's pretty different to regular Highland Park. One would guess there is a decent combination of American oak and European oak in this product. The nose is just like toffee and fudge. I know that's been a consistent thing with the last couple of videos we've reviewed, but that is a very, very sweet nose. The classic heather honey, heather smoke thing is relatively far back. But it is very complimentary of those creamier, sugarier, milkier sort of smells. There is no raisiny, kind of Christmas cake chocolatiness to it. But there is a very small element of kind of roasted coffee and some kind of burnt sugars, some kind of burnt chocolate kind of smells. But it's not a very direct sherry influence. I believe these bottles come with a small booklet in them, and in that I think there's a map of the oak that's been used throughout batch 1 and batch 2. Like I said, I don't have that with me, but I think in batch 2 there is more European oak than there was in batch 1, which would explain those most kind of coffeed, burnt chocolate notes. Let's taste. I remember Rob and Jeremy had stated in a video that they thought that drank particularly hot. I think it drinks fine for the percentage it is. Taste-wise, we get the arrival of everything we have on the nose. Creamy fudge, toffee, there's some nice caramel notes. The smoke is present, but it feels a little bit diminished. That could just be a situation of having its cask strength. How influential those barrels were. Are they first fill, second fill? But there's not loads to scream about on the palate. It just kind of mimics the taste, it just mimics the smell. So we don't have like a huge contrast in style. The finish, however, is kind of bordering on those drier, more kind of intense European oak flavours. Tobacco, like really kind of dark fruit. It's a nice kind of, it's almost cherry-like, but it also reminds me a lot of Bakewell tarts. For those of you that have never had a Bakewell tart, it's like it's a cake, essentially, like a little tart case that's filled with jam, something which is called frangipan, which is like an almond, like a sweetened almond paste. And then on top of that is some royal icing, which is just icing sugar and water, I think, with a little cherry on top. And there are some nice kind of almondy notes, certainly jammy, but I think that's moving towards those European oak influences. Compared to the whiskey I tried last week, the Gold Spot, This is certainly shoutier, and it does have trademark components of what Highland Park is. Maybe I'm just being a bit too difficult on them for just saying, you know, if you put a number on the front of it, people would be maybe a little bit more interested and ask more questions. Because if you can release a relatively young, high-strength whiskey, it makes sense to me to put an age on it. Packaging aside, marketing aside, all that stuff. Because this is cask strength, I am just going to add a little bit of water to it, just to see what happens. For those of you that saw the Middleton video I did for the 10,000 sub video, and I added water to that and then forgot to talk about it, there is now like just a comment, not a comment, but there's a bit in the biography about what happened when I added water to it, so please do check that out. Or someone's probably asked a question about it by now and I've answered it. Okay, so if you add a bit of water to it, the smoke comes out a lot more. There's also a really interesting note of like petrichor, like the smell of the grass after it rains. That's coming through quite a bit. And again, like almost like a porridgey note, like kind of oaty, barley grist, that kind of thing. A huge hit of dark chocolate comes out on the end, and a rolling tobacco note as well. What I'm thinking about when I taste this whiskey is, and this, to be fair, is an unfair comparison, but many moons ago, on a live that I did during Christmas time in about 2017, I bought a bottle of Whisky Shop exclusive Highland Park 11-year-old, which was bottled for our membership club. 67% ABV from a refill American Oak Sherry Puncheon. That thing was brutal. It smelled like rum. And the more water you added, the more classic Highland Park it became, which for me is always honey, chocolate and coffee. I know obviously it's a peated product, but the peat has never been a primary flavour profile for Highland Park for me. It's always been about these kind of earthier / sweet notes. This is getting there with that. And by all means, it is a cask strength product. It isn't ideally designed to be drank, not a whole bottle at that strength. You want to take your time with it and tailor fit it to what you need. But the smoke turns almost into bonfire smoke with a bit of water. Actually reminds me a lot of Bowmore 15. Or just Bowmore as a whole. And then to taste it, you get in these, certainly dark chocolate and coffee. I'm not too sure about honey. No honey notes. But the oak is coming through a bit more. It's becoming spicier in a different kind of way. It's not just alcohol spice we're dealing with now, it's oak spice. But I don't think it's a bad product. I think the liquid inside the bottle is perfectly good. And by all means, the fault of the bottling and the legal contradictions with these labels isn't the fault of the liquid inside. It's the fault of the people who decide what goes on the label. So, as a liquid, I give it the same score I gave Gold Spot last week. I gave it an 8 out of 10. This is a perfectly nice whiskey. I'm ashamed to say I forgot I owned it. I must have bought it in a little bit of a spree and kind of forgot about it because it was already open. So I must have just tasted it and then thought, But with water, which is how I'll be drinking it, and probably in cocktails too. I'd be intrigued to know how that sits in the realm of like an old fashioned or a Rob Roy. Just seeing what happens to it. But overall, an 8 out of 10 for the Highland Park Cask Strength Batch 2. But Highland Park, you're probably not going to watch this video. And I gave you loads of praise for the old 30-year-old that is over there. You can just see it in the corner, just there. Small changes. The strength is fine. The bottle's fine with me. I don't mind the bottle. Just a little number on the front, because if you're going to release something of this potency, let's be as honest as possible. I think that's the best way forward with this. Hopefully you do a batch 3. I'll be intrigued to try batch 3. But yeah, thank you all for watching. That is Highland Park Cask Strength batch 2, and that is an 8 out of 10. I'll see you all next week. Cheers.